Legal disclaimer. Bespoke Group investment advisory services are offered only through Bespoke Advisory, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Everything we share here is just for information and education. It's not investment, legal, or tax advice. Bespoke does not offer or solicit investment services to the general public. And as always, investing comes with risk, including the possible loss of principal. Okay. Hello, Matt. Hello, Blaine.
Hello, Claire.
Hi. How's it going?
It's good. Blaine, thank you for joining us today on the Bespoke audio collection.
I'm excited.
We are excited to have you, my friend.
Yeah, we are. And today's conversation is really going to be an exploration of the intersection of family businesses and estate planning. And for context here, I'm sitting with Matt and Blaine, who are both estate planning attorneys, and I was hoping you each might share a few words of what that has meant. Well, sorry, I just introduced Matt as an estate planning attorney. I need to.
I'm recovering. I'm an estate planning attorney recovering.
But yeah, maybe provide some context of kind of each of your zones and what Matt's zone was of estate planning.
So Claire, as you mentioned, I was an estate planning attorney for a long time. It's the only type of law I ever practiced, starting in the year 2000, and was working with successful families back then. A lot in the ag community because I was in Oklahoma, but ag, manufacturing, things like that. But then along the way, starting in 2006, I went in-house for a company where my primary responsibility was teaching substantive estate planning law strategies to other attorneys. And that gave me a just kind of a different perspective, almost as an academic for a while, where my focus was less on maybe how the strategies impacted the real families behind the strategies and more educating other estate planning attorneys about how do you think about these strategies? How do you apply these strategies? What jurisdictions do you consider? Things like that. So I did that for about a decade, and then left that company in 2017 to start my own law practice with a good friend of mine, Jonathan. And because of my background and his background, very quickly we started working with ultra successful families all from around the United States. Many of those people had operating businesses, dental offices, hotel chains, you name it. And so that was the work that we were doing. And a lot of the work that we did was co-counseling other attorneys on implementing the types of strategies that we'd spent a lot of time educating people about. Blaine had been working with Jonathan, and so this is kind of part of the natural Venn diagram overlap between how I got to know Blaine. But Blaine was working with Jonathan in a law practice that Jonathan then left to join Evergreen Legacy Planning, which we started together. And then along the way, the transition away from estate planning practice for me into what I'm now doing at Bespoke started in the fourth quarter of 2017, where I was introduced to a successful serial entrepreneur in the Bitcoin space. They had hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. They had extensive equity positions in multiple Bitcoin-related, blockchain company-related companies. And the veil was lifted off my eyes about what this whole asset class was. And so really our first foray into the Bitcoin space was through a successful serial entrepreneur business owner in that space. And we had an opportunity to help them think about structuring their equity positions, how to structure their Bitcoin, how to navigate an uncertain regulatory environment around their digital assets. And those clients and then other clients like them that we started to attract took us in the direction that we've been going now, where the services that they were asking for really reached beyond the scope of what a law firm is really designed to do. And we started creating what might be considered a series of family offices around clients like this, where we're providing really comprehensive wealth strategy services, facilitating the relationships of a lot of other advisors, whether they're attorneys or CPAs or professional fiduciaries, and also helping them navigate their banking relationships, navigate their trading relationships. And when it becomes appropriate for them to reconsider their investment allocations, we help them with that as well. We help them with organizing and managing their small businesses or their large businesses in some cases. And so that was kind of my journey in the context of closely held businesses. And it's given us a different, just kind of a different lens through which we view the entrepreneur. And so now I'm gonna turn it over to Blaine to kind of tell a little bit about his story. And Blaine is one of the people that we get to work with closely on behalf of some of our clients now.
Thanks. I mean, Matt said he's a recovering attorney, and I'm I've still been thrust into being an attorney, and it really was that for me. Never intended on being an attorney to begin with, but here I am still practicing. Um, my family owned a business, and so when we talk about the intersection between entrepreneurship and estate planning, I saw it early on. So my grandparents started a business uh, that made fresh French fries for local restaurants in the LA area, and my dad grew up driving a bread truck to deliver those onion or French fries to all these restaurants. Um, you know, anyone can really make French fries, so it was not a super, successful business, but it paid the bills and got, my dad the ability to go to college. And as he was coming out of college, he joined up with my grandparents to continue to work in that business. But he saw an opportunity when he went to a trade show with his mother, um, and saw a breader batter machine, thought that was really cool. So he bought one and they started doing onion rings. And then they realized, well, it's a lot easier to freeze them. And so they started doing frozen appetizers, onion rings, cheese sticks, breaded zucchini, all the very healthy stuff you buy at fast food restaurants. Um, he met Carl Karcher and talked to him as Carl's Jr. was growing in Southern California at the time, got a small portion of their business. And that business grew until he had all of Carl's business, and then eventually got Jack in the Box as well. And so again, the appetizer business grew. Margins were still razor thin. So me growing up, we were not wealthy by any means. We were pretty, I grew up in San Bernardino, California, pretty, middle class type area. Went to public schools, and my dad worked really hard. Then when I was in high school, he developed a line that created grilled and fire roasted vegetables that no one else really knew how to do. And that became really valuable because a lot of different companies wanted it, including big worldwide agribusinesses like Nestle, ConAgra, some of the biggest agricultural businesses in the world, um, wanted this product for lean cuisines or Weight Watchers or frozen pizza lines. They were just using it as an ingredient in lots of different things. And so we saw the value of the business kind of skyrocket all of a sudden. Um, and so my grandparents decided, got some good advice. I'm still in high school at the time, but they decided to do a generation skipping transfer. So they transferred 10% of the business to me and my four sisters each. So we had, between the four of us, we got 40%. And then my dad still owned 60%. Um, Great. It was, it was back when the exemption was 600,000. We were able to move it all without paying any tax. It jumped two generations. It was really, really good. Um, Fast forward, I'm finishing up my college career at BYU, doing a business degree because I totally planned on being in the business. My dad asked me to go to law school simply to be able to kind of be in-house, deal with contracts, oversee, some legal matters. Great. I decided to go. I would do that and went to law school. Did not do the normal law school thing, didn't take evidence, tried not to take anything that was really litigation focused, although I took a bunch of weird business and finance classes like secured paper and general partnership tax and all sorts of weird stuff. So I came out of law school with kind of a weird education in law, but it turned out to be really helpful because as I exited the last year of law school, McCain Foods came to my dad and offered him to buy the business and offered him enough to make it worthwhile to him. And so my plan kind of changed at that point. And I didn't, although I had 2 great degrees, I did not have a real plan for what I was going to do with those. I tried litigation for a second, and I'm not a litigator. So then I went back and started looking at what I did like to do and recalled my estate planning course, but also the business succession course, and really thought about that and liked those types of law. In the sale of the business, we had a great M&A attorney that dealt really well with the sale of the business, but the estate planning side really didn't happen. So my dad did some things that, didn't really work in the end. Tried to move to Nevada and have an apartment there and get out of California state tax that way. That really didn't work. Did some other things that, probably just spent a lot of time, effort, and money on things that never really panned out. And that's where I saw kind of like, oh, when people are selling business, there's all these attorneys and people and financial advisors that are all looking at the deal of the sale of the business, but there's rarely anybody looking at the seller and how he's going to receive the payout and what position that puts him in at that point and how to deal with that. So that's really where I liked to spend my time and effort. And so when I started doing estate planning, that's what I dealt with. I looked for families with closely held businesses, and then I wanted to talk to them and see what they wanted to do with their business. Did they want to pass it on to the next generation? Are they looking to get out? Is there a reason they're looking to get out? Do they maybe have thoughts about, they see a big payout and maybe think it's going to be this great thing. Do they know that, what that's going to entail, what the taxes are, all those things? Have they looked at all these different aspects? And so I deal my estate planning in that area where we look not just at the sale of the business, but at the person and the family as well.
I wanna talk about the case for keeping a business versus selling it, without, of course, giving any financial or
Mm.
legal advice, right? But I think that, well, I know that this conversation today is about exploring and making the case for keeping the business or at least considering it.
Uh-huh.
Can we talk about that a little bit, and maybe some of those benefits of keeping the business that fly under the radar? It seems that it might seem or be almost a norm to like sell it.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in today's markets, we're seeing that that's kind of the plan going in, right? I'm gonna create this business, I'm gonna grow it fast, and then I'm gonna sell it and be done. Um, which I guess is fine. I mean, that if that works for them, that's fine. Um, it really comes down to what the goal of the family is. And my experience in growing up in a family business was that the business and the family were pretty similar. We tried to hold the same values, tried to work, honestly with each other, all those types of things that you deal with in family dynamics, we dealt with in as business as well. And we had employees that worked with us for multiple generations. We had some that worked for us for 40 to 50 years. They're family at that point. So how do you deal with the sale of the business and still provide for them. They probably don't want to work for somebody else. They like working for you and your family, right? See, there's a lot of dynamics that go into it. Now, if the goal, what I find is that most entrepreneurs haven't thought about it. They haven't even thought about what they want to do with the business. So that's usually where my conversation starts. Um, let's talk to the kids. Is there anybody that wants to take it over, that has any sort of interest in what the business does?
Can you go back,
Yeah.
sorry, to where you said that most of your conversations start? They start in a
Mhm.
position of where the individual hasn't really explored.
Yeah, so if they haven't explored and we're talking about what to do estate planning wise with their business, I mean that's the first kind of questions I want to know is succession to the next generation even a possibility? Like, are there kids that want to take it over, have the tools to take it over? Um, what education do they need? Do we still need to support them in certain ways? Um, then, if that's a possibility, now let's look at it. And then, if it's not a possibility, then we can look at, is there a plan for sale? When is that sale going to take place? Who are the buyers? What are the markets like?
And how long of a sorry, Matt, I
No,
don't
no,
wanna
go
cut
ahead.
you off, but how long of a journey, right? This is a discovery phase you're
Yeah,
describing. How long of a journey, because these are very big questions.
yeah, yeah. Um, estate planning is interesting in that way, in that you get intimately involved with not just your clients, but their entire families. Um, all of the rifts and hardships that they've had with their children. You have to know, about what their goals are and what they really want to do for the rest of their lives. Um, one example is, sometimes clients uh, will kind of say that they want to sell a business and they want the cash flow, and they want to be able to do all these things. And you start talking to them about it, and they're not going to travel. They're going to stay kind of in their home. And so, is it really worth it to have a big cash payout, or is it much better to have the business to pass on? So, um, the yeah, the time frame for that really depends a lot on the client and how willing and able they are to become uh, open with you and be able to discuss those things with you. Um, I I I work hard on the other side of that to make the experience of coming into the office and speaking with me a pretty comfortable one, so that they don't feel like they're coming into like a litigation office where there's they want to clam up. We want them to be much more open when they come in and talk with us. Um, but yeah, that it can be anywhere between. Sometimes there's clients that come in, they are very open people, and they start talking right away, and you get in and get into the planning. A lot of times, though, it's going to be a few months at least before and multiple touches, right? You have to have multiple discussions with them in order for them to start to feel comfortable with them. And I also find that maybe starting with some low level work, like just restating their basic foundational estate plan, going through a process with them allows them to then build a little bit of trust with you in what you're going to do and what you're going to deliver.
I've got a few thoughts I'd like to kind of explore here that that this line of conversation has sparked in my mind. Um, and Claire, you can just take these wherever you think they ought to go. But um, I've noticed a kind of a difference in almost like entrepreneurial client archetypes. There are some clients, there's some entrepreneurs who are just so good at starting a business, growing a business, and selling the business. I've had clients
Yeah.
like this that are they're just, they've got the Midas touch. They've got a great idea at the right time. They execute against it relentlessly. It explodes on them, and then they sell. And what do? They go do it again. And they go do it again. And they go do it again. And very often, these are in completely unrelated or seemingly unrelated industries. Um, those types of clients that, again, in my experience, I'm going to be interested to hear, Blaine, if you've seen this or seen something different in your practice. Those types of clients, um, it's almost like they don't know what else to do beyond make money. They're just really good at it, and that
Mm,
defines part of the family culture. It's like mom or dad or both just are these serial entrepreneurs, and they're always doing something. But it's not
mhm,
the business itself that is the center of the family activity. It is the economic engine that that fuels the next thing. And then there are other types of entrepreneurs who become really focused on a domain, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's agriculture, whether it's manufacturing, whatever it is. And the company, the business, uh, even as it becomes successful, the business becomes part of the family culture, and the founding generation talks about it at the dinner table, and kids grow up like Blaine grew up in generations of a family where we're talking about the food business and what's next and where the opportunities are. Um, it's almost like there are different entrepreneurial archetypes. Blaine, does that resonate with you, or have you seen something different?
no, absolutely. And I think it's important for estate planners, especially to not try and shove a client or a family into a box of what you've dealt with in the past. It's really important to understand the client personally and find out what their goals are. And I find that that's probably the biggest and hardest part of my job because planning after that's easy. Um, once we know what they want. But yeah, there and I would say sometimes there's a little of both, you know. Um, my family had a multi-generational business, but my dad's kind of that one of those people that just like has that Midas touch, right? Like he can just go do business, whatever it is.
Yeah, he's gonna
He's been
succeed at
involved in
whatever he
bank.
touches. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been involved in banks, in storage businesses, and all sorts of stuff, and he's just really good at business. Um, and I can tell you, I don't have that touch, right? I'm much more like methodical in the way I do, um, in the way I work, and it's just yeah, you have to be very diligent in getting to know your client.
And I think it sometimes, Claire, and I think that to some degree, it's the client getting to know themselves in some cases too. Is like helping them understand their own
Absolutely.
motivations and things like that.
Yeah.
And but the note that I had here is like there's there are some people who are just these builders. That's all they know how to do is build. And then there's some that get really content with, or they get really successful at going to steady state and being more maybe incremental in growth and ultimately define a vertical. I'm thinking of a family that we know in up in the Midwest, and they've got a really successful irrigation and pipeline supply company, and they've done a tremendous amount of work. Dad, who was the founder, is still around, still active, and it's now run by a couple of brothers. But this is now a multinational company that owns its vertical. But one of the challenges is one of the sons is much more passive and is, I mean, he might be on the line, he might be doing something that's seemingly a bit more menial or a little bit more day-to-day type of stuff and doesn't really care about the business. It's just a job for him. And the other one, the other son, the other brother is all about building this thing. I want to dominate this industry. I want to expand into other verticals. I want total supply chain domination. Blaine, how do you have you had similar experiences like this with clients where some kids are somewhat involved, some kids are heavily involved, some kids are not even remotely interested, some kids might even resent the business because it was, it was the family's other child that seemed to be loved more. Um, how do you navigate some of those types of dynamics in the client relationship?
Yeah, and on that question, the dynamic I was gonna ask about too is, I know the case where there's a sibling who wants to build and hold on to this thing because they resonate with the identity, but then there's a sibling who wants to get out of this thing, so even competing desires within the next generation.
Yeah. There's always a lot of family dynamic, and yes, of course we see this. Yeah, it was in my family. have said I wanted to take over the business. I really liked finance. I have 3 sisters. One had an English degree, one went into medicine, and the other one became a masseuse. So like they did not want anything to do with the food business. We didn't get to that point where we had to figure out ways to divide up stuff uh, after my parents passed away. But I have seen that definitely. And what do you do? And that's where good, it's funny. We carry a lot of different titles as attorneys. One of them is counselor. I almost feel like I want to go back to school and do some like family therapy schooling to like learn how to be a family therapist, because I do feel like I'm in that role a lot.
Blaine, I've thought about this so much as I've interviewed Matt and Jonathan and other estate planning attorneys. When I hear about I almost in every conversation, I'm like, is there a family therapist or a couple or a therapist involved in this? The nature of these conversations are so personal and intimate and interwoven into, the parts of people's lives that are kept behind closed doors.
Yeah. And there have been times where I have brought in a family therapist because the issues and the dynamics were so complex that I did not have the tools to get through them. And not just were they complex, they were intertwined with the business and the estate planning and everything else. So you had to kind of do it as a group therapy between you, the attorney, the client, therapist, and the kids. And it was really interesting. But then, like I said, once you know what they want to do, right? Okay, we want to give one child the business, but we don't want to leave the other children out just because they want to do other things, right? So that's where estate planning, I think, really does come into play, right? That's where I get to use the tools I have and the knowledge I have to bring in, okay, are we going to bring in insurance? Are we going to sell off a piece? Are we going to do some sort of purchase from the child that wants to take over the business? What are we going to do? Because that child should be able to receive the benefit of putting all the work into the business as well, right? So as the business grows after they've taken it over, they should really, enjoy the fruits of that labor as well. So you really have to plan out, okay, what's the ownership going to look like? What's the management going to look like? What's the cash flow going to look like, right? Because ownership's just ownership. Cash flow, how are we going to pay people? How are we going to employ people? Do some people not want to be involved in the management? Maybe they want a job on the line or whatever. That's what they want to do.
But they shouldn't have a vote in strategic operations and things like that. It's like, you can own an economic interest in this enterprise, but you may not have a vote, or your vote may be diluted by the family who's actually building and driving this thing forward. Claire, one of the things I was going to say is, Blaine talks about going back to school maybe and getting some family counseling chops, which I think, always makes sense. One of the things I would flag is, I think one of the things that draws people into this area of practice in the first place is a very high EQ and a high level of curiosity. I mean, we're still technicians. At the end of the day, we've got to know from a tax perspective, a legal structuring perspective, there's a lot of like left brain stuff we need to be able to navigate. But there's also kind of the right-brained asymmetric thinking, creative thinking, curiosity, high emotional quotient to be able to have these broad conversations and help draw from people, what is your current state? What is it that you want this to do and mean, not just now, but in the next generation and maybe generations in the future? And then how do we kind of work backwards to get you to something like that? Knowing that it's never a straight line, and that I would imagine, Blaine, your perspective is similar. It's like the work is also kind of never done because the dynamic is constantly shifting. The economy is moving, the planning is moving, the family is moving, the business is moving. And so as a result, whatever strategies you put into motion, they have to be really resilient, but they also have to be pliable such that they can adapt and they can be adjusted as time passes.
When there is tension within a generation, or between different generations, what have you seen as being um, an example of one of the unlocks that kind of gets that family out of gridlock, one could say, and at least move on to what will be the next problem, but right, get out of that stuck space.
Yeah. Communication is the key. Um, and and it might be difficult conversations at the beginning, right? And that's why it does feel
Yeah,
like therapy, right? You're going to be bringing in multiple generations, and you have to get the parents to say what their fears are, and you have to have the kids be able to receive and hear
yeah,
their parents say, you know, we don't really think you're in a position where you can take this over, right? Like you may feel disappointed, and you have to be in a position where you can accept that and
yeah.
then be able to respond and talk to your parents and say, okay, but this is what I've been thinking, this is what I've been doing, and this is why I may be, and you have to get those conversations going and then get them all out. And I may be jumping ahead here to one of the other things, but you know, I think we want to talk a little bit about what some of the mistakes are that people make, and this is a big one because I cannot tell you how many families come to me to do estate planning or to do business succession planning 2 months before they plan to sell a business. And you go, how are we going to have all of these conversations in 2 months? It's not going to happen. And they're
So
just seeing it.
how much time ideally? I know that's like
Yeah,
but really is it like
yeah,
but because this brings me to something that I'm thinking about, which is this idea of, I said what is one of the keys, and your response was communication, but then I think the
yeah,
answer came a few words later, which was you said difficult conversations,
yeah.
because communication and difficult conversations are very different. And
Mm,
I think about this in my own life, right? Like, how can I avoid really big, difficult conversations? And I think that means like always being constantly in with an openness of like always having little difficult conversations, like
yeah,
having little kind of uncomfortable conversations kind of avoids the big, like, explosive moments that then kind of you're, like, piling and piling and piling and piling and piling, and then you're looking at it's the 2-month mark before selling, and we're like, "Wow, this is kind of a gold mine of conversations that we're gonna need to dig into."
yeah. And you kind of hit on the key there, avoidance, right? We are built to avoid uncomfortable situations. Um, and we do everything we can to avoid stuff. And like you said, your plan is to do it in small doses, right? So that we
Yeah.
avoid the big one. I don't know if that works. Sometimes I think it does, but I think sometimes we're just talking about the facial stuff and not really getting to anything deep. And then that deep thing kind of just builds
Rears its ugly head.
underneath anyways. Um, I
Right.
think, one of the things, uh, I didn't plan on talking about this, but I, uh, I'm Mormon and I served a Mormon mission, right? And most people have seen Mormon missionaries with the white shirts and the black tags. We end up knocking a lot of doors and approaching people, in uncomfortable situations. And I feel like that helped me in a lot of ways understand that we have to get out of a comfort zone if we are going to grow in any sort of way, whether that's personally, as a family, as a business, in our careers. We have to be able to be comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability that goes to that. And while my history is different, I think I got that level of comfort by a decade of being forced to do public speaking. And I still do a lot of public speaking now. And it's like, to a certain degree, you're just standing there naked with your ideas. And if you don't know your
Yeah.
stuff, and if you can't field the difficult questions that you don't know are coming, it can be crippling. And so I do think there's a level of vulnerability that it takes to be able to have those types of conversations. Um, and I think a lot of what you're saying, Blaine, from counseling families navigating this, what to do with this family business. What does the future of this family business look like? Is it is it an ownership structure that works for the next generation? Is it selling a piece of the company to another family member, or a close friend, to start to create a gradual succession mechanism? Is it selling to a large conglomerate like McCain Foods and having a
Yeah.
formal exit, and now we're going to take the winnings and do something else? It seems like so much of the conversation has to be about what are the expectations, because certainly the founders, the ones who built this business, it seems to me that their expectations are paramount because they're the ones who built this. But uh, at the same time, the kids who kind of grew up in this business owning family, they're going to have expectations too. And we can't necessarily presume to know what their expectations are if we don't ask. They may have no to your family's history, Blaine. You have siblings who seemed like, based on the education paths they took, they had no interest in the family business. You, on the other hand, did clearly express interest in the family business, but then Dad got an offer he couldn't refuse. Um, it's like
Yeah.
was your family actually having those conversations in real time about the types of course of study your sisters would take, the types of course of study that you would take? You went to law school to become family general counsel, effectively, of the family enterprise. Were you having those conversations as a family, or was it just part of the undercurrent? And how did your family navigate that dynamic within family conversations?
Yeah. You hit one of the key issues in my family is communication, right? Like my grandfather's a stubborn old Sicilian man. My dad's an only child. He spoke directly with his mother most of the time. If he had to talk to his dad much, it usually turned into fisticuffs. Um, and we were, we each were loved, and they provided a wonderful home for us. But to this day, me and my sisters kind of joke about it because my mom, if talking about uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable conversations, when those conversations start, we'll watch my mom walk out of the room.
Mm.
We'll watch my dad, either the temper comes out or just ignore it, right? So no, we weren't having good conversations. And I imagine if we had gotten to the point where I was taking over the business and my sisters were doing other things, we could have had serious issues because we didn't talk about it.
Where
Um,
was that,
yeah.
do you think, coming from in your parents?
Yeah, it's tough to know. Like I said, my dad's an only child. I don't think he ever had to deal with other kids or other people. It was either authority coming from his parents or he was the guy,
Right.
and so he was the authoritative one. And
He
I
didn't wanna
so
collaborate or
so
talk about.
he
And
very
after
much dealt in an authoritative
Got it.
kind of kept his
vertical
own
line
counsel.
of
Yeah.
yeah.
And then do you
Um,
think your mother's was coming from a conflict avoidance?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And I'm
'Cause it
not
was
sure,
'cause
yeah, I'm not
probably, like,
sure
these
why, but yeah, I do.
but these spaces were I mean, they get heated, I guess, right?
Yeah,
They get it's conflict.
Well, I
yeah,
think that, so
yeah, and
from what I
so
see.
I definitely wanna say that, my family and our family business, we probably got really lucky in how things turned out, because we didn't fall into a lot of these problems, but we were no different than any other entrepreneurial family.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Blaine, you're an entrepreneur in your practice. I'm an entrepreneur as founding Bespoke. There is a there is a level of self reliance. There's a level of, to some degree, keeping your own counsel and having the
Yeah,
courage to just do it despite
yeah.
misgivings,
Mm.
despite people who tell you otherwise. And so it's
Sometimes you have to go by your gut and
yeah, being a
and
successful entrepreneur is
you have
not
to
an
trust it.
it was not an exercise in democracy. And so,
Yeah,
but
Hmm.
I think part of the challenge then becomes, as something becomes successful, we start to realize the limits of our own capabilities,
Mm.
and we have to bring
Right.
in other people. I can't do what Claire does. I can't do what
yeah,
Suna does. I can't do what Lauren or Rob or Elijah or anybody else on the team does. And so I have to be the one who kind of casts the vision. This is the mission that we're on. But but at the same time, I have had to let go of the authoritarian reins that I held when it was just Jonathan and me, and we could do whatever the
Wow.
heck we want to. Now it's an enterprise that's bigger than me, and I will tell you that
Yeah.
it doesn't come naturally, I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs to start to give up some of that control and to actually start to share with vulnerability, start to kind of seed some of the direction of this thing that we started. And so in your dad's case with, with what he was building, it's like, okay, well, he was the one who was driving the bread truck. He was the one who went to the trade show and saw the fryer and found the fryer. And he was the one who said, even talking with his mom, but saying, okay, hey, this vegetable thing, nobody's doing this. And it's a natural extension of what we're doing. Let's just do it. And so had he not done that, it would have not have been the successful company that it became. Um, and still at the same time, the the maybe the inability or the failure to maybe separate the direction of growth, the strategic direction the company needs to go, and the future of the company operationally and from a ownership perspective, maybe the failure to kind of divorce those ideas in the entrepreneur's mind, that might be one of the big points of tension that I think the counseling role, Blaine, that you're talking about really starts to kind of dig into. One of the things that I've been wanting to kind of flag here, which Blaine, you and I talked about this in a private conversation earlier this week, but these entrepreneurs, in your case, your dad, in my case, my expertise with Bespoke, but this is true with every business owner. They are experts in their domain. They have a high level of confidence, they have a high level of conviction, and if they don't, they're failing as a business. Um, and
Yeah.
so that carries with it, to a certain degree, either a sense of hubris, um, or a or a sense of I don't know, like a sense of weakness, maybe, that they don't understand your world. They don't understand why I need to have these various trust structures. They don't understand why I need to consider trying to exit out of Nevada or someplace like that. I'm growing a food business in California. I was born and raised in California. It's like, now you're telling me I got to restructure this whole thing. It's like, and I've got to pay you thousands of dollars to figure this stuff out and explain to me stuff I'll never understand. I just want to go build my business. How do you navigate this tension when you're dealing with somebody who is truly an expert in what they know and still so ignorant in what you know? And then, how do you kind of draw them into this conversation?
Yeah, I find that really interesting. I think when you do have a business and you're running it and you're the entrepreneur, it really does become your whole world. And because you're good at it, you, you're good at everything in your world because it is your world. And so to kind of step back and see, okay, there's other things going on that maybe I don't understand. I the best way to kind of communicate that to clients for me is to just draw analogies, right? And so I will say, listen, we're much like a surgeon, right? You don't go to your surgeon and tell him how to do the surgery. Right? You might,
Unless you're a surgeon.
yeah, you might consult on, what surgery you want done and, where, how much, how intensive you want it to be, how deep you're going to go. But when it comes down to it, you're not telling him where to cut and where to do things, right? And so you do have to put trust in other people. And so much like that, we're going to counsel on a plan. You're going to be highly involved in what that plan's going to look like. But when it comes down to the execution of it, I, it's going to be me putting trust together, doing the transaction documents, and you're going to have to trust me on those, or we're just going to get bogged down in the process of hundreds of documents that need your signature that you're not going to understand.
Yeah, and wouldn't you agree that if someone's not open to, the idea of being in a trusting relationship, then there might not really be it's not
Yeah,
gonna set anybody
not going
really
to
up
work.
for success, it won't work. I'm thinking I'm just doing a time check, we have about 15 minutes left. I am really enjoying this area of the conversation that we're exploring, which is more of like the identity side, the family dynamic side. And I I don't want to really move us from there because I think there's a couple other threads I want to pull on, and maybe we can do a follow-up conversation actually where we just focus more like on the logistics or, maybe structures and planning and ownership and governments and kind of more of those tactical things and really looking at this thing as an asset and what those options are. Um, but I had back to kind of where we've been. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
please.
So when I hear the word family business,
Mm-hmm.
I think of what you described, which is this generational, like somebody in your lineage discovered something and I have this kind of like tradition. It's almost like it's like a tradition in my mind. Matt, I'm thinking of when Matt was in New York and we went to the Moscot eyeglass store, which was it's a generational family of eyeglasses that they've started in Brooklyn. And even the experience of being in that shop was this very like, it had tradition, it had family photos, it had timelines, it had stories. And I was seeing that, Blaine, when you were describing the family business that you're a part of. But then you said something interesting, which brought a whole different image into my mind, which is, and Matt was speaking about it too, and it was this what's happening today of building companies to sell them and having this builder's mentality and getting really good at this thing. You build it, you grow it, you sell it. And in my mind, that feels really modern to me. Like that, I'm not having that same kind of like tradition, nostalgia feel.
It's very
However,
modern and it's fairly American.
Mm-hmm.
okay. And so and this is where I think there's probably a gap in because I'm having associations right now, but they're both, and this is also going back to what Matt was talking about like the different archetypes of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us or paint a picture of like the modern the modern entrepreneur who's creating a business that because and now I'm imagining that there is kind of some combination of this where there is a modern wealth builder who maybe doesn't realize that they could hold on to this thing and not sell it and go on to the next business. And what is that? And what like is this an expression of their identity? Is this something that can be transferred to their children? Is this something that can remain? And can you talk? Are you following kind of
Yeah.
my?
And so one of my favorite courses in business school was organizational behavior.
Mm,
And luckily at BYU, it was Steve Covey who developed their
Mm-hmm.
organizational behavior program. Um, it goes into kind of what you're talking about with tradition, right? The culture of your business. How do you actually build that in an organization? How do you get people all on the same page? How do you get them all towards the same vision? Um, I do feel modern technology has accelerated that process, so that you can actually integrate a culture into a business rather quickly, uh,
mm,
through communication, AI, all the other, tools that we have at our exposure that we didn't before. Um, Now, I do think that there's a little bit of we rely on that now, so there is kind of like a built-in tech culture now. So
right,
businesses do feel like we got to get the product, get it online,
right,
build up a market, and then sell it, right? Like, and that works to a degree, and you have a whole corporate business culture that's kind of geared towards that. But
right.
in my mind, it's not as rich a culture. It seems much more to buy into kind of like the corporate industrial complex type
Right.
thing,
Right.
where you are, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be successful. That's there, right? There are those big businesses. There are that, New York is there, Wall Street's
Right.
there. they're going to be buying up businesses where they see there's a market that they can buy up.
Right. And I think
All
it's about what type
yeah,
what type of experience do you as the builder want to have? I've heard
yeah,
stories about how I mean Matt and I have talked about before about how there are builders who will they've been uh I don't want to say programmed, but they build and then they sell and then they've come into this new level of wealth and it was like, oh wait, everything that I thought that I wanted has now changed. All the problems that I thought I was solving for, the problems changed. Like there's this realization moment that happens sometimes for entrepreneurs who are saying, huh, like maybe I want more. And I think, or maybe it's something different, not what
yeah.
you thought. I don't know what word. Insert the word that resonates for the entrepreneur.
Yeah, much like I think it's similar with the family itself, right? We try and successful families develop a culture. And when I say successful, I'm not talking monetarily, right? I'm talking kids growing up
Yeah.
healthy and being, becoming
Thriving
Really
and yeah.
successful
flourishing as
themselves,
humans. Yeah.
thriving, right? Like you have to have a culture. And I think,
Every
historically
family has a culture,
religion helped.
whether they
Yeah,
create it or
religion
not.
helps build that. Other things as well, culture in your community as well. Um, you have to do that in your business too. If you want it to thrive, if it's going to be something that's going to live on, right? These businesses that are quick, right? The build up and sell, they kind of disappear into the bigger company, right? That buys them up. If you want something that's going to last and have some meaning to it, you have to build up that culture.
Yeah, Claire, I want to kind of pound a little bit on this idea a little bit that you raised. There's this experience that somebody wants to have, and there's the experience that somebody wants to create. And to my mind, this starts to differentiate between the sense of ownership, what will I have, versus stewardship, what will I create? And the way we think about
I like that.
this within Bespoke and with these types of families, and it gets, I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong. There's different values, I guess.
Yeah,
But for those who are thinking from a stewardship mindset, what am I going to create? We talk about this a lot at Bespoke's executive leadership level. Um, Part of what a company can do is create family capital for sure. And part of that is then to allow us to then invest in other things that are an expression of our worldview, impact oriented investing, or just other opportunities that are asymmetric to what we're building. There's the ability to educate and prepare the next generation for whatever their success looks like, either inside the company or outside the company, whether it's going to medical school, becoming a masseuse, going to become the corporate general counsel for the family business, whatever it is, but creating capital to educate, creating capital to then fuel philanthropy and invest in our communities and invest in the causes that matter to us. But then there's other stuff that's very real, which is things like developing talent. It's like I think that Bespoke, the kind of culture we want to create here, I want to be able to create an environment where the people who work for Bespoke, however long they're here, have an unparalleled opportunity to become a great professional. And if they stay with us
yeah,
for their entire career, that's wonderful. If we're a stepping stone for something else, that's their journey. But we want to create an environment where they have the best opportunity to thrive. And if we sold the company, we would lose that control. We would say, what do I want to have? What do I want to consume versus what I want to create? And part of what I want to create is a fertile environment to grow people. Another one is providing jobs just generally. I want to create jobs for the rising gen. We have seen headlines time and time again that the market sucks for people who are trying to go into careers right now. The financial services industry is a grinder. AI is disrupting everything. Where are the jobs these days? I want to create a place where people have opportunities and promise. We can't hire everybody, but we can hire the best people and we can give them opportunities to really thrive. And I think the final one, which is maybe less true for Bespoke because we're such a globally distributed company, but if I've got a manufacturing company, if I've got a food supply company or something like that, very often it's creating a positive impact in my community. And whether it's underwriting the local baseball team or whether that is creating parks or whatever it is, or just creating a robust environment for the employees who clock in every day, making sure that they're well provided for and they have the needs that they have get met so that they can then fully engage in the community. So I think people who have more of a stewardship mindset start to think, okay, well, this isn't just about me getting some big payday someday. So to what end? If I take a big payday, now I'm relying on the market to generate whatever I invest in to generate ongoing returns for my family. And I've lost all these other abilities for an impact. If on the other
Mm,
hand, this family business continues to grow and thrive and evolve through future generations, that engine keeps running, and then all these
yeah,
other benefits continue to percolate throughout the family business.
yeah. I love that, Matt. I mean, you can tell that you have spent intentional time thinking about your culture, and that shows, which is just such a awesome thing to look at and to witness, because you can tell that because you've spent that time, you know what you want your company to be, and you're going to make sure that it happens, and you're going to have not just a financial legacy, but a true value legacy for those that follow behind you, which is awesome.
Okay, this is amazing. I'm seeing the narrative arc here. And I'm gonna pose one more question or idea for you both. And I want to use that as a bridge actually to um Blaine, if you're open. I mean, I don't mean to
Yeah.
sign you up for a second episode, but I think it will be a great bridge
We can
to
do 2,
a
3, 4, how many ever you want to.
okay,
Yeah.
to a conversation with where you and Matt can go deeper on the planning stuff. But because that's actually the stuff that's the good stuff that enables all of the like dreaming to work.
Yeah.
And so the thread I want to pull on to wrap up this conversation, Matt, you said something which is you expressed like a you express something that you want for your company. And I know that we're not technically a family business, but there is overlap in the way that you approach this your company. And you said, I want to create jobs for the rising generation. I think that that is a brilliant example of somebody knowing what they want to create. And then Blaine, you were speaking about how this critical work that has to happen where a family does the inner work separately and then together to understand what they all individually want, expect, and can put that on the table to have a negotiation of, okay, how is this company going to evolve?
Right.
And I want to talk about that evolution because that is the word that's coming to mind. Like that's a negotiation between competing desires and wants and vision, and areas to build. And so, fine, let's say everyone's now sitting around the table. They've done their 10 sessions of, family therapy, and people have done their inner work, and they say, "This is what I want, and I'm buying in on this business, and we're not going to sell it because we want to create something for the future." How do you negotiate all those moving parts?
Yeah. That's the trick, isn't it? Um, One thing I've seen, at least from my family, um, I talked a little bit about how we have had difficulty communicating, but on the other side of that coin, my family has we've had lots of family members that have gone way off the rails, just personally, and my family does not leave them to be there, leave them alone. They circle the wagons really well and protect the family. And the family can be the business or your employees, whatever. Um, so you do have to have this negotiation. You do have to have some uncomfortable conversations, and you may even have some hurt feelings. But in the end of it, you gotta circle those wagons, and you have to be able to come back together and say, "Okay, we've had this discussion. There is an authoritative issue to this. We've talked about that, right? Someone's going to have to make that final call about which direction we're going to go in, and now everybody's going to work to do that, right? To follow that direction. And even even if you're not, for the people that maybe didn't get their way, the fact that they get to voice it, the fact that they know they've been heard,
Yeah.
and the fact that they know that they're still valued in the family or in the business gives them a much better opportunity to continue to be successful in that business or family.
Yeah, and I think that I think that's powerful, and I think this is Claire. This might be kind of the segue for a future conversation that you're talking about, but it's like the technical documents, all the strategies, the various trusts, the various partnership or operating or shareholder agreements that come into place. Those things have to be done in alignment with the vision for the company. And it's like, we need to know if we're building for an exit, if we're building for a conventional American model that we're going to sell a slice to venture, or we're going to seek outside capital or whatever, or are we building for perpetuity? And then how do we think about that? I mean, again, this is something we're doing right now within Bespoke, because we started with a very simple model because it was just a couple people cranking. But then as we've grown, it's like, wait a second, there's a possibility for us to do something really different here. First of all, what do we really want to accomplish, and what would that look like, and what will that feel like? And then we have to work with our council to then say, okay, well, look, we're not doing the traditional American model. We're going kind of more like a Swiss model. We're like a European um, series of family-owned businesses, if you will. And so
Right.
the idea is to maintain something that is closely held, but that can transcend a century, not necessarily be a 10-year ride that we then just all take a big payday and then, people are working for somebody else. I mean, we firmly believe that the people who will run and own the company are people who are in the company either now or in the near future. People who are, some of them might be related to the founders. Many of them won't be. But we want to create this culture where we're cultivating leaders within our company, giving people graduated positions of responsibility in the company so that someday I can take a more passive role. So Nick can take a more passive role. Others inside the company can take a more passive role. And we've created a culture where the next generation of decision makers who will be stewards of what we started. Um, our responsibility is to take it from zero, which we have done, take it from 0 to 1 and create something that has some momentum, and then ultimately hand it off to the next generation of owners and leaders so they have a successful starting point, and then their responsibility will be to take it and make it better and be ready to turn it over to the next generation of leaders 5 years, 10 years, 50 years down the road. But the culture has to be articulated first, I think, um, in order to then inform the technical legal structures. And it's also the kind of thing that we didn't know this stuff day one. You can't know this stuff day one. And it's part of this evolutionary process, which Claire is going to speak to this idea of systems thinking and the ability for us to then create this dark matter, which is what Bespoke comes into, to kind of hold these things in tension against each other, so that the work that Blaine is doing works with the work that the accounting team is doing, and what the fiduciaries are doing, and what the money is doing, and what the jurisdictions are doing, so that all of this stuff continues to evolve in a healthy, productive way.
And orbit in a supportive manner around
Yeah.
the person at the center.
Right. The
Yeah,
family.
you're kind of the kite, right? You got to have that tension there for it to rise.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I had an idea and it went out of my head, but that's all right. Well,
That's okay. And we are up on time, and you know what? I'm going to sign you both up for a follow-up. I'm going to be planning that conversation because I want to talk to you both about like the role of the family office, to expand on what Matt was just positioning. I want to pound on that idea of a family office, of it as a service, how it's failed, what estate planning even means in that context, and then get into those practical frameworks that we've been referencing a handful of times. But that's it for today. And Blaine and Matt, thank you so much. This was great.
Claire, great job. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Okay.
All right, guys.